So, welcome to the special meeting of Toowoomba Regional Council, 28th February 2024. This meeting is open to the public and will also be live streamed. I'd like to thank those of you in the room with us today and acknowledge everyone watching via Council social media channels. I acknowledge the Mayor, Portfolio Leader Councillor Carl, councillors, the Chief Executive Officer, General Manager of Planning and Development Group. I acknowledge the Aboriginal parties whose songlines traverse these lands we meet on today, the Western Waka Waka, Guyabal and Jarawar peoples, and pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging, for they hold the knowledge, the rich traditions and bold ambitions of Australia's First Peoples. Item number 2, councillors, is the attendance, including apologies, leave of absences, granting leaves of absences and declarations of conflict of interest. I don't have any of those, don't have any apologies, no leave of absences, no granting of leave of absences and no declarable, prescribed or declarable conflict of interest. Item number 3 is suspension of standing orders for item number 4. Can I have someone move? Councillor Bonhoff, the Mayor, Councillor McDonald, all those in favour? It's carried. Sophie Spencer, you are now going to take us through item number 4, which is a material change of use code, multiple dwellings, 19 units located at 7 and 9 to 9A Kitchener Street, East Toowoomba. Thank you, Sophie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, councillors, Madam Chair, fellow staff and guests. This report before you is to consider a development application for material change of use for multiple dwelling at 7 and 9 to 9A Kitchener Street, East Toowoomba, to assist councillors with the identification of close associates or related parties for the purposes of the Local Government Act. An updated table of involved parties have been provided. The development includes 6 residential levels of 19 units, which range from 2 to 4 bedrooms, 1 car parking level and 1 rooftop level. The site is located in the mixed-use zone, the Parkland Living Precinct. If you could bring up attachment 4, please, and is affected by the flood hazard overlay for vulnerable uses and restriction area and airport environs overlay under the Toowoomba Regional Planning Scheme. The residential development is consistent with the intent of the mixed-use zone, which is for development in a compact urban form, and more specifically with the Parkland Living Precinct, which envisages predominantly residential development orientated towards the nearby parkland. It is acknowledged the site is challenging, having a site area of 1,599 square metres, an irregular triangular configuration with 2 road frontages and a slope falling approximately 3 metres from Phillip Street to Kitchener Street. If you could please refer to attachment 5 that shows the contours. As such, performance measures have been proposed, particularly regarding building setbacks and waste collection, which are accepted in this instance. Performance measures have also been sought regarding street activation as outlined in more detail and in the report. The proposed development is 8 stories high, which is inclusive of the car park level and communal rooftop, and does not exceed the 8-storey limit of the mixed-use zone code. If you could also bring up attachment 6 of the plans and elevations, please. The car parking level extends above the natural ground level by more than 1 metre on Kitchener Street, and as such is not considered an underground basement. The applicant advises that the car parking level cannot be lowered given the grades required at the vehicle accesses from Phillip Street. The proposed vehicle accesses from Phillip Street and the car park beneath the building is supported. However, its exposure at the Kitchener Street level has presented challenges relating to activation and interface with the street. Kitchener Street is a key frontage, given it is a high order road, a regional arterial, and provides access to East Creek Park, is highly visible and contains a bus stop. The development includes design measures which contribute towards activation, casual surveillance and built form, including upper unit balconies overlooking Kitchener Street, a pedestrian access at the southern end of the car park, and seating at the site's northern edge. Thank you. However, The car parking level extends for 51 metres along Kitchener Street without windows or doors. The proposal has not included active uses or design measures to provide activation at the street level, which is required under the performance outcomes of the mixed-use zone code. As such, it is necessary to consider the purpose and overall outcomes of the code, which requires activation at street level where appropriate. It is relevant to consider the unique characteristics of the site, being a small size, slope and irregular shape, which impact the design. Furthermore, other planning scheme outcomes preferring vehicle access to Phillip Street and the requirement for compliant vehicle driveways and ramps have the effect of fixing the level of the car park. These limit the opportunities for activation at street level. On balance, given the site constraints and greater weight of other planning scheme outcomes, the design of the development is appropriate in this instance and satisfies the purpose and overall outcomes of the mixed-use zone code. Council officers recommend conditioning design measures to improve the visual interest at the street level for pedestrians, including street trees, variation in the car park facade and landscaping treatments within the Kitchener Street setback. The application has been assessed in relation to engineering matters and connections to water and sewer are readily available. Conditions are recommended to approve the site-based stormwater management and engineering services report, which includes on-site detention to mitigate peak discharge and stormwater pump out for the recessed car parking. Kitchener Street is a regional arterial road with bluestone curbing and a bus stop. 2 vehicle accesses are proposed via Phillip Street. This is supported by council officers as this is the lower order road, and this also avoids the Kitchener Street bluestone curbing. The 44 proposed car parking spaces significantly exceed the minimum 19 spaces required under the Transport Access and Parking Code. The proposal will necessitate changes to line marking in Kitchener Street and Phillip Street to accommodate curb build-outs for street trees and a loading zone for on-street waste collection. Appropriate conditions regarding line marking and external works have been included in this recommendation. Street trees are strongly desired and contribute towards a high quality interface between the development and roads as required under the planning scheme. There are some constraints, however, which inhibit street tree planting within the curb. As such, curb build-outs have been conditioned in both Kitchener Street and Phillip Street, where they do not compromise the existing bus stop nor conflict with underground services or obstruct sightlines. And indicative locations have been marked in red on the plans, which, that one? You can see. Anyway, there you go. The rooftop level provides communal recreation and outdoor space, including a pool, entertainment and recreation area. This rooftop area, in conjunction with landscaped open space on level 1, makes a total of 450 square metres, which is equivalent to 26% of the site area. That exceeds the minimum 20% required under the mixed-use zone code. Proposed landscaping also proposes 523 square metres of landscaping, which is equivalent to 33% of the site area. This also exceeds the minimum 20% required under the planning scheme. The development is required to mitigate noise impacts under the Environmental Standards Code. A 2-metre high acoustic fence on level 1 is conditioned to mitigate noise from the adjoining fire station. Building attenuation is also conditioned for the upper units to mitigate noise from surrounding non-residential uses and road traffic noise from Kitchener Street. Lighting impacts from the adjoining fire station can be mitigated through screening, which has also been conditioned. The development application is subject to code assessment, and therefore under section 60 subsection 2 of the Planning Act 2016, the assessment manager must approve the application to the extent it complies with all the assessment benchmarks, may approve the application even if the development does not comply with some assessment benchmarks, may impose conditions on an approval, and may refuse the application to the extent it does not comply with some or all of the assessment benchmarks, only if compliance cannot be achieved by imposing conditions. The proposed development has been assessed in regards to the applicable assessment benchmarks as detailed in the report. The proposed development generally complies with the assessment benchmarks or can be conditioned to comply. Where the applicant has not provided sufficient information, conditions have been imposed to ensure compliance. As such, it is recommended that Council approve the application pursuant to the provisions of Section 60 of the Planning Act 2016 and subject to the conditions listed in Attachment 3.
Excellent. Thank you, Sophie. Councillor McMahon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Sophie. Excellent report. Madam Chair, I'd like to move the officer's recommendation, please.
Yeah, I have a mover and seconded. Councillor McDonald. I probably would like to go to some questions though. It's on the table. Questions, Councillor Summerfield.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Interesting move. I just wondered if I could. So first of all, on page 7 of board books, right down the bottom line, no vehicular access to Kitchener Street is proposed. But then wording has been added after that, which I'm rather puzzled that it was even added. Nor would it be supported given its hierarchy, classification and the bluestone curbing. I just don't understand why that would be put in there when there was no asking for that. I just thought that was unnecessary wording in the report. It's sort of, I felt, yeah, anyway. So just going to the paragraph above it, the standard conditions are also recommended, requiring the applicant submit a schedule of external finishes which ensures the high quality finishes of the development be realised. And I'm just wondering, in whose opinion? I brought this up in a previous discussion in planning about something that had happened at the Gold Coast where the planning department at the Gold Coast were trying to tell developers their preferred finish, that it wasn't one that they liked, they wanted something else, and we talked about it and it was agreed that that wasn't something that would align with what we do. And I just worry that this might be an example of that actually happening, and I wondered if somebody could clarify that, because in whose opinion could be quite wide and varied.
Thank you for the question, and through the chair, if I could respond. So a condition that requires a schedule of external finishes is quite often a standard condition, particularly for this kind of development where its visual articulation and interest is of particular importance. For some other developments, this is probably not a relevant consideration, but it is particularly for this one. But I would say particularly as it is highly visible from the public realm as well. But in terms of the need for it, quite often with an elevation, it may not necessarily detail or provide the detail of the finishes, like what type of material, what kind of finish. Is it a raw finish? Is it actually painted or coloured cast or whatever that might be? So that's all that's really talking about. We wouldn't be imposing personal preferences over it. It's just to ensure that there is an appropriate finish to this building, given that the visual, its visual appearance is a relevant consideration.
Thank you. So personal preferences won't be taken into account. It'll be based on materials being used, not design. Is that right?
That's right, yes. So we will receive the schedule of external finishes from the applicant, which includes what finishes they would like to use. And it doesn't necessarily pin them down to a particular manufacturer or anything like that, but we're just trying to get an idea of what this is going to look like and just ensure that it is providing that visual appearance that it is required to achieve.
Okay, thank you. It'll be interesting. And I also did wonder about the quote on Board Books, page 23. It says unique site constraints. I consider that this to be quite a standard development. I don't think I see a whole lot of more site constraints in a lot of other developments in a lot of other areas. This is quite a simple site, so I'm just wondering why it's considered a unique site constraint.
Yes, so through the chair, there were a lot of things that had to be considered in the assessment, which includes waste collection as well. Our preference from council point of view is that waste collection is contained within the site. That coupled with its configuration, also the slope of the site made it very difficult to achieve that, and also very difficult to achieve the activation on the street. So it was just a note to really recognise that, yes, this development is very standard, like a multi-storey development, surely it is. On this particular site, there were some challenges, and we were just acknowledging that, and that's why it has led to the particular development that it has as presented.
Thank you. So then the only other thing I had was the curb build-outs for the trees. Will that take away street car parking?
Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, there will be some changes to car parking, although that was going to be the case regardless of any street trees. So what we have done is tried to position street trees on both Kitchener and Phillip Street, where this isn't going to involve the removal of car parking spaces, and it isn't going to obstruct the movement of buses or the refuse collection vehicle as well. So these are essentially kind of available spots that weren't going to be car parking spaces.
Further questions for the officer? No. Sophie, can I ask a couple of things? One, I'm just not really clear. When you look at the elevations, particularly the Kitchener Street one, which is the one you're worried about, with its the finishes and things. When it says on the diagram there that the colonnade, is that? I'm just trying to get a picture of what that looks like. Is it sort of like an arbour with? No, am I reading that? Not being very visually.
Yeah, it's a frame.
Yeah.
Essentially, but it's not going over the pathway. So, yeah, if we got a, I don't know if we have a better plan. Sorry, if you could just scroll
I was
through.
looking at this one on 59, yeah.
If you could bring up the elevation, if you can, please, from Kitchener Street.
Yeah, keep going down, Kirsten. Keep going. That one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I'll use this. So the colonnade is this frame, which you can see with the plants kind of hanging off it there. It sits in front of the building, and it's contained within the site. I believe it kind of extends up from that balcony of that first floor, and then it will come down in front of the car parking level on the ground floor. But perhaps the applicant could clarify that later.
Sure. Okay. And my only other question is too, I know that you said that you can condition for noise and lighting from the fire station, but, I'm thinking about those people who move into the valley and there was lots of really good places to see music, and then all residential comes there and now they want the music gone, So I don't know whether there's an answer to this, but, can you see in some period of time where, no, that fire station has to go, it's disturbing us,
Yeah, good question. Thanks for that, Madam Chair. And perhaps Marty could explain this further, but in terms of siren noise and that sort of thing, because it relates to emergency service, it's essentially exempted from requirements to meet noise. But yeah, I'll let Marty clarify that.
Thank you for the question. So I'll just draw your attention to condition 93. So the applicant is required to assess the background noise of the surrounding area in determining what building treatments and mitigation is required. And they're required to achieve the acoustic quality objectives, which are state-based internal noise limits for the development. So their reverse amenity assessment will be required to show the development can comply with those limits for all internal dwellings in the site.
Not sure that I really understood that, but I think that's more about me rather than you. So thank you, Marty. Any further questions, Councillor Shine?
No, thanks, Chair. Thanks for the report, Sophie. Just two things. One is that this is code accessible. Normally we wouldn't be dealing with this. Is there any particular reason that you're aware of that we are, other than the request of a number of councillors, I presume?
Thank you, Councillor. I could probably address that. So it's open to councillors to call in any of the applications. It just requires that 4 councillors notify the CEO in writing, and they're not required to provide reasons.
No, fair enough. And just on page 7, and you've explained it really, I think, in some detail, what's called activation. I wasn't familiar with that word before, but I take it it's the basically beautification of the street with trees or no? No, right.
Well, yeah, so the activation really talks about activity so much. So yeah, windows, doors, or some kind of active, more things happening in that space. Yeah.
What's now happening is the trees, is that right? Or what's happening, what's changed, put it that way?
Yeah, thank you for that. So what has been conditioned is kind of a series of design measures, including landscaping, the street trees, and ensuring that there is that articulation at that human scale on the street, because we acknowledge that this is difficult to achieve activation for this development given this site. And so that was considered to be acceptable.
Thank you, Sophie. With no further questions, I'll have the presentation on behalf of the applicant, James Dewhouse. Did you going to come up and speak? Yeah. Well, you've got a good 5 minutes up here. Thank you, James.
Good afternoon, councillors, ladies and gentlemen, and Sophie, thank you for your presentation. Obviously, we agree and accept Sophie's recommendation, and I think just take the opportunity to thank Sophie for her time and assistance through the course of the application. I think going to Councillor Summerfield's point, on face value it seems quite simple and it's a great location for what has been proposed here, but we did, I think, need some collaboration with council to be able to address levels, site shape, which is unique, as well as overcoming some things that sound simple, but on-site refuse collection is difficult to overcome. So we appreciate council's assistance in working with us on that. I don't wish to take up your time, other than that obviously we agree with the recommendation. We're excited to see a development like this be approved, given this site has had a long history. We've been involved with it for 10 years, and we're excited to see this project come to fruition. I think in terms of a couple of the queries that were raised, the schedule of finishes, Councillor Summerfield, I would agree with you in most instances, albeit that I think this condition has been modified slightly to remove the key constraint that we typically have, which is locking us into one particular material by a particular supplier or manufacturer, which has been removed, and therefore it does give us some flexibility to work through a detailed design phase and then provide a schedule of finishes toward the end that we're comfortable that can be delivered, and then council has some surety over what will actually be constructed in the end. The fire station, councillor, I understand that operationally they can't turn the sirens on until the Kitchener Street roundabout in any event. So that is partly being dealt with. Also, and Marty could talk to it in detail, I think there's a primacy of use or establishment of use is relevant as well. So people coming into a situation knowing that something is there, and I know that you'll probably remind me of that in years to come, but that is relevant. That around who established first. But in this instance, I think, and from speaking with the architects, the quality of building, of glazing, will be over and above standard for that reason, and then also just to ensure comfort of future occupants as well. I think and just in relation to activation of uses, Councillor Shine, I think that was something that we, typically council would like to see a unit on ground, or walk-up unit for us to be able to come into, which we weren't able to achieve. But in this instance, we do have, whilst it might be slightly above, we have 19 units that are overlooking the parkland, and whilst we're sort of talking about the footpath that's immediately in front of us, we now have a lot of units that are overlooking the whole of the park, which allow that, I think, more comfort for that to be used after dark or whatever it might be. So I think that we've worked well to be able to achieve that design outcome, and thank you for the collaboration to date. I'm happy to take any more queries or questions if there are any, otherwise I'll leave you to your...
Thanks, James. I don't
Motion.
seem to have any
Great.
questions for you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well done. Making me gain time for this afternoon. All right, with that, can I have someone move that we reinstate standing orders, please? Councillor Carol Taylor, Councillor McDonald, all those in favour? Okay, so the recommendation is that council approve the application MCUC 2023-5244 for a development permit for material change of use code, multiple dwellings, 19 units, pursuant to the provisions of section 60 of the Planning Act 2016 and subject to the conditions listed in attachment 3. Now, Councillor McMahon, you have moved and Councillor McDonald has seconded. All those in favour? It's unanimous. Thank you, it's carried. All right, now we need to have someone also move the suspension of standing orders for item number 6. We can have Councillor Bonhoff and Councillor McMahon. All those in favour? Item number 6 is the request for a waiver of infrastructure charge levied in relation to development permit for a material change of use impact extension to intensive animal industry at Dunmore Road, Dunmore. And
Thank you, Chair, and Shakita will speak to this item, who's part of our infrastructure charges team.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Councillors, this report considers a request for full waiver of infrastructure charges levied for the material change of use for extension to intensive animal industry and rural workers accommodation at 281 Dunmore Road. Can we please have attachment 3 for the LGIP map brought up on the screen? Thank you. The subject site incorporates 4 lots owned by the applicant. The site is within the rural zone, and according to the LGIP mapping, it is located in a rural charge area. The development is served by transport network. The site contains the existing intensive animal industry with a maximum of 30,000 standard cattle units and a rural workers accommodation. Can we please scroll down to the plans? Thank you. The new development approval allows to extend the intensive animal industry to a maximum of 60,000 standard cattle units. The approval also includes rural workers accommodation for a maximum of 48, for a maximum of 48 persons and additional infrastructure on the site. The approved rural workers accommodation is considered to create additional demand on council's trunk transport infrastructure. According to current charges resolution, there is no a charge rate listed for rural workers accommodation under any of the development categories. Considering that under the planning regulation, rural workers accommodation is included in the definition for accommodation activity, infrastructure charges section applied a charge rate adopted for accommodation, long-term rooming accommodation, and the total charge levied for this development was $122,710.56 for 28 suites. Last year, the applicant requested for a full waiver of the levied charge, considering that the approved development will have negligible impacts on the transport network as staff reside on site and staff car trips from the site are infrequent. The approved rural workers accommodation is not eligible for a discount or consideration under current adopted incentives policies as outlined further in the report, based on the current of council outlined in the charges resolution and incentives policies. The officer recommended the council to refuse the request. However, the alternative options are provided for council's consideration in the report.
Thank you so much, Shakita. Questions for the officer? Councillor McDonald?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thank you, Shakita. Thank you very much for the report. The options, can you just talk me through the options, the alternative option 1 and option 2, and just the basis for each of those for an option for council to consider?
Well, as I said, in adopted charges resolution, we don't have specific charge rate for rural workers accommodation. Our decision to adopt the charge for rooming accommodation was based on previous charges notices issued for similar development. The options that I am provided is based on that our decision was based on officer's recommendation, and council maybe have a different opinion and choose the option 1. I recommended to choose the alternative charge rate of $21.85 per square meter on the basis that rural workers accommodation is ancillary to the intensive animal industry use, and in this case the charge rate for transport network would be based on a gross floor area of 28 units, which is 350 square meters. In this case, the total levy charge will be $7,647.50. The second option is to apply a charge that is used for the short-term accommodation, which is lesser than the long-term accommodation. It's $2,191.25 per each suite with 2 or less bedrooms. And in this case, the charge would be $61,355.
Thank you. Thanks very much. So that's the only question I have at the moment. Thanks.
Shakita, can I ask, I know that it's coming up later, what are the infrastructure charges to go from the 30,000 to the 60,000 standard cattle units? Because I would have thought that that's the thing that's putting more pressure on our network. It's not so much the accommodation.
Okay, so the intensive animal industry is charged under high impact rural charge rate, which is $21.85 per square meter. Under this application, change application that was approved last year, they did not propose a new gross floor area. Therefore, the charge only based on proposed 28 suites or units for rural workers accommodation.
Well, no, I'm asking, well, say when later on, our next item is the approval from the 20 to the 60, 30 to the 60. thousand.
Yes.
So is there no extra infrastructure charges to be paid
That's
by that?
correct. So there is no extra infrastructure charges have to be paid for the extension to the intensive animal industry.
Well, I don't know whether you'd rather me wait until then, but I just, that seems sort of a bit topsy-turvy to me. Like if you've got an increase in numbers,
So according to charges resolution, the charges are based on additional gross floor area.
so is the feedlot not increasing its gross floor area?
That's right.
Okay, right.
Yes.
Even though you're presuming there's more production,
There
would
is
be
more production, but not additional gross floor area there.
Okay. Councillor Taylor, did you have a?
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a very good point you raise, and it does my head in to think that doubling in units is not going to mean more product in, more product out, which is more pressure on our network, which is really feeling stress at the moment. And whilst we welcome the economic benefit and the increase to rural activity and agricultural value that we have, it's at the moment that our network is feeling great pressure. So I cannot believe that we would think that doubling would put no extra pressure on the because we have product coming in and we have product going out, and both of those will be doubling.
I'll just get the General Manager to make a comment. We can. Yeah.
Thank you. So for the team that assesses this, Shakita and her team, they have to look at what policies we have that are relevant to be able to apply a full or a partial waive. So in this instance, there is no there is no relevant policy, and that's why the recommendation of council officers is not to waive. Because there was the request that it come to council by the applicant, the team have put in those additional alternatives should council wish to consider them, but then ultimately it's a matter for council. So with those additional alternatives, it would see council receive, for option one, certainly much less. It would drop down to 7,600, and option two would be reduced to around half. But ultimately, because there's not a policy that supported a different decision of council officers, and at the request of the applicant, it's a sort of matter for you to determine which of the options, or you may choose to come up with a different option.
The CSRO transit tool recognises the extra pressure on the road network of product in, product out with single units. And I suggest that we look at that in the future, because that's the only thing that actually is meaningful when it comes to looking at pressure on the road network.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Sommerfield?
Thanks, Madam Chair. So I'm just trying to clarify in my head. We don't have a trigger for it, or a policy or whatever for it. We understand that having the accommodation there means that that's not cars travelling in and out to go to other accommodation, so that's less cars on our road. Is that right? As a result of having that accommodation on site?
No, I mean that would be if they didn't drive into town or to buy things.
Well, if they were to drive to another farm or to drive to town or wherever alternate accommodation was, if they didn't have this accommodation. I'm just trying to get this in my head. If they didn't have this alternate accommodation on the farm, each morning and each night they would drive in and out to work from a neighbouring farm where there might be a cottage, or to the nearest town or whatever. So if the accommodation was there, that would stop that. You're saying that in the next report that the increase doesn't have infrastructure charges attached to that. Is that right?
As in for the additional cattle units?
Yeah.
Yes.
It does? It doesn't?
No, it doesn't.
Okay. Thank you.
So this is relevant to the accommodation.
Yeah, and we probably, so help me here, we need to focus just on the accommodation for this particular thing. We can't be considering it against the other report. Yeah, thank you.
And sorry, it may have assisted if they had been reversed in their order, so you could have dealt with the application, but it's tabled as it is. So from the perspective of council officers, there was no policy to support a waiver. It doesn't exist. So, and that's why we've put up these different options.
Councillor O'Shea and then Councillor Carl.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. The question I have, was just trying to understand, same thing, get my head around this. So, when this was initially approved and the notice was, the negotiated decision notice was issued back in November 2023. So, that was for the extension, etc., including this workers, this camp that we're talking about right now. Correct.
Yes, negotiated decision notice was issued in relation to the intensive animal industry extension and the rural workers accommodation. That's correct.
Yeah. So, at that time, was it apparent that this is what the charge was going to be? At the time when it was issued, was it apparent that this was the charge that was going to be issued?
That's correct, yes. We discussed it with the applicant in relation to the number of units they're proposing for rural workers accommodation. We did give them the credit for 20 units because under the planning regulation, there is a part, just give me a second, so Schedule 6, where it says that development development local categorizing instrument is prohibited from stating is accessible development. And this schedule is rural workers accommodation, where it says that a rural workers the material change of use doesn't result in accommodation with a total capacity to accommodate more than 20 employees or over rural use across the following premises. Considering that section, we thought that the existing 20 units can't get the credit. So we only charged 28 additional units in this case, particular case.
So the applicant previously enjoyed or received an entitlement, as you should, to the first 20. So this is really about the remaining additional.
Okay. And just, I think you explained it earlier, but again, just to be short, so because we've got like the variance in the options here in terms of price are huge, so it's trying to understand which best fits. I know that's why we're here today, but so what they have been charged is what is the only applicable charge that could have been charged at the time. That's why it is what it is. Is that right?
So our charge rate is based on the maximum rate prescribed by planning regulation. However, planning regulation does not prescribe a charge rate for each or every use that we approve. In this case, the same case is with the rural workers accommodation. And our charges resolution has a part where it says under the table number 3, adopted charges for non-residential development, other uses. The adopted charge will be the adopted charge for another similar development category in table 3 that the council decides to apply to the use. So often when this is the case, the officer puts forward the recommendation to adopt the charge for the similar use. In this case, we thought the similar use would be accommodation long-term. And we have a charge rate for rural charge area under that development category, which is $4,382.52 for each suite with 2 or less bedrooms. So this was the recommendation of the officer, and this charge rate was applied previously to the rural workers accommodation users.
Okay.
So the discrepancy between the charge rates is high, but unfortunately that's not our decision. We adopted the prescribed amounts that are given by outlined in the planning regulation. And for high impact rural, which includes intensive animal industry, the charge would be in the rural charge area $21.85 per square meter of gross floor area. This is the adopted charge.
Yeah, okay. And Madam Chair, one more if I may. So yeah, thank you. Just trying to understand the ins and outs of that. And so the other question that I have is, and I noted in the report, so obviously the reason behind, or the reason stated for this request from the applicant is essentially that this particular part of the development does not impact on the infrastructure of which it is being charged for: roads, water, etc., etc. From the assessing officer or GM point of view, is that, that statement, I mean, so do we refute that as a statement, or is that an acceptable position? Not trying to, but do you know what I mean?
Yes, I understand. The reasons provided by the applicant is incorrect, because currently our charges are based on demand, on our trunk infrastructure, not on the impact. Their reasons provided, they are saying that they are not going to use the transport network, but this is not how the current charges framework works.
Thank you. I might speak to that item. So with our infrastructure charges, generally, it's a set amount that applies. We don't need to, for example, if you're doing increasing density within the city limits or outside, so it's a set amount. We don't sort of weigh up on all occasions, because certainly for some applicants it would be much, much greater than those charges, but they're capped. So this is sort of the system that we have in place for infrastructure charges, and you're obviously across the issues in general. So I might just add, so what the team has tried to do within what is able to be done with the current infrastructure charges resolution and the options. So they've applied consistently what they've done in the past for rural accommodation, but as it has been brought to council, they've also given you another two alternatives, noting that the council officers were required to make a particular decision because there is no policy that supports any other decision, and the decision that is the recommendation is consistent with the charges that have happened for other rural accommodation.
Thank you, Dr. Nicola. Councillor Carl?
Thanks, Chair. Just a question, similar use. Is it a fair assumption that this would be long-term accommodation based on the relevance to the overall development? Would that be a fair assumption? And given that the application goes with the land, not the applicant, the land and the use, add into infinity, could be multiple owners.
Thank you. I think as the number of cattle units has increased, so it's doubling, so it follows then that it's the number of workers required would be the same.
It's commensurate, but
yeah.
Nicola, is it a fair assumption based on the increase? I tend to take my winkers off, and we can't shoebox one from the other because one is associated with the other. This one wouldn't be here without the other and the increased activity, let's be real. So then my question is, given the intensity of the activity, and the application is about the activity, approval of activity, and it goes with the land, not the applicant, it'd be a fair assumption, would it, to say that the accommodation would be the similar use under the policy guidelines or lack of that we have, or however you want to say that, it'd be a fair assumption that it'd be long-term accommodation.
Once the approval occurs, they can run up to the particular number of cattle units and have those particular number of workers living there. There won't be an end date on that, and so it will attach to the land.
I recall a conversation about variances on numbers, albeit a fees and charges discussion, but distinctly yesterday. And this is about variance on numbers of head of livestock and the dilemma we run into.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor McMahon?
Thank you, Chair. I just, thank you for the report. I suppose I need a little bit of help understanding this. So the 21.85 per square metre, right? And then in your recommendation, that's added up to the full amount, but in alternate option 1, 21.85 per square metre has added up to 7,647. So is your recommendation taking into account the whole farm, essentially? Can you just explain to me how 21.85 per square metre, this one's 350 squares, so what's your one? Like, where is the sums on?
So the first recommendation is charge rate per square meters of gross floor area of the rural workers accommodation specifically. And option 2 is the charge rate of $2,191.25 per suite with 2 or less bedrooms. This charge rate was adopted for accommodation short term.
So for option 1, the charge is against rural workers accommodation ancillary to intensive animal. Option 2, it's about short-term accommodation. So then it goes to the number of suites with less than 2 bedrooms. So there's two different ways to charge.
Yeah. So the officer comment, can you show me, you got to 122,710. So how does 21, I just need some help with this. How does 21.85 per square metre add up to 122,710? What have you times that by to get to that sum, that amount rather?
No. If it's yeah. So do you mean the infrastructure charges, not just that we issued?
Yes.
Okay. So first of all, we considered all 48 units that they have shown on approved plans for rural workers accommodation, multiplied by charge rate that is adopted for rooming accommodation for $4,382.52, and then we credited 20 units.
So the initial charge, if we didn't apply that credit of the 20, which was consistent with the state government policy, the charge would now be just over 210,000. So it was charged on the basis of these being bedrooms that are not within a suite, so the rooming accommodation. And so the number of those bedrooms not within a suite was 48, and that's the charge rate per each unit. So if we, so the discount was applied, which is consistent with that state policy, and so the discount was already applied is just over $87,000, and it reaches a total levy charge of $122,000. So it was what would have been the levy charge minus the credit because of the 20 units, which was consistent with the policy that Dr. Shakita, I should say, read, and the planning regulation.
Yes.
And so it's the reduced charge is 122.
122, that's how you got.
Similar.
Thanks for that. My next question is, I think, ambiguity over the word ancillary. So, you've applied in the officer comments, I'm back to page where those options are, 70 on board books. Intensive animal industry use. And the fact that a worker's cottage is intensive animal industry use. I would say that you've said it's ancillary to it because it's a supporting structure to help with intensive animal industry use. So option 1 says, on the basis that the rural workers' accommodation is ancillary to intensive animal industry use. So if it's the main part of intensive animal, is you're saying it should be the full amount, and if it's ancillary to, is that where you get the option 1? And does it come? My reading is it comes down to that word of ancillary or primary cause to determine if those options are accountable or not. Could you explain that, please?
Well, in my understanding, this rural workers' accommodation is actually ancillary to intensive animal industry. Yes, because it has to accommodate the rural workers on this particular property.
So that actually lines up with my thinking, that it's not part of the intensive animal agriculture. It's not the animals. This is ancillary because it's the workers' cottage. So I struggle with how we I don't know how we are not doing ancillary rates. Could you provide anything to help with my?
Well, infrastructure charges section uses the charges resolution that was adopted by council. Currently, it's charges resolution number 5, which was adopted in March 2022. And we cannot use any other rates other than the ones that were adopted by council in charges resolution. And we only can adopt a different rate for the uses such as rural workers' accommodation in this case, based on our assumption that it's similar to any other development category that is listed under the table 3 in charges resolution.
Just thank you for that. One more, if I could. Alternative option 1 says is ancillary to intensive animal industry use. So that would probably be a house that someone lives in. Now, because these are in fact short term, I don't get that short term to me would mean higher changeover. So why would a short term I'm just working through these alternative options. Why would a short term one be 61, so way higher than the 7,500, because people aren't staying there as long? Why does that make it longer, might make it higher charge?
Those are just alternative options that we can recommend.
Okay.
And it is up to council not to go with the alternative option number 1 or refuse the request for waiver.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I appreciate your help. I just had to get my head around it. I might, unless Adam would like to make a comment, Madam Chair.
So, Councillor McMahon, you're wanting to know why is there such a big difference if one's a short term and one's...
I suppose, more broadly speaking, I can find evidence to clarify what we're talking about into any one of those 3 categories. So do we pick the less one and go ahead, or I suppose I'm trying to distinguish what the alternative options are and how they differ from the first one. So I still don't really have that incredibly clear in my head, so maybe I'll let some other questions happen and we'll move back.
All right, we might come back to you. If you don't get an answer by the time we're finished, make sure you put your hand up again. Councillor Farquhar.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Shakita. My questions come from page 157, which has been provided by the applicant, looking at building, doubling the size of their business, but also generating another $22 million for our local economy. At the top of that page, a second paragraph on page 157 of Board Books. Yep, at the top. The proposed rural workforce accommodation would not impose additional demand on council's infrastructure networks. And the bullet points following, the site will be serviced by not be serviced by council's reticulated water system. Site is not serviced by council's sewage system. So site provides on-site recreation opportunities for its staff. Impacts on the transport network would be negligible, which Councillor Summerfield just brought up before, because the staff would be residing on site. Car trips from the site would be infrequent. That last bullet point, though, the development will contribute to the road network by provision of conditions relating to road networks. So our provisions for this, are we making any changes to the road networks?
The conditions that we imposed for upgrade of the road infrastructure are conditioned under section 145, which is non-trunk, and non-trunk infrastructure has no relationship to the infrastructure charges. We only can offset the works that are related to trunk infrastructure in this case.
Thank you. And so there's no impact on our council's resources. It's self-sufficient. And it's just such a huge difference in pricing, which we've discussed. Looking at the accommodation, it looks like a couple of dongers, which is also used in mining. Do we charge similar rates for mining?
So the charge rate for accommodation uses are different to any other uses. They based on the suites and the number of bedrooms in the suite. So in our charges resolution, for example, in a rural charge area for a suite with 2 or less bedrooms, it's $4,382.52, and for a suite with 3 or more bedrooms, it's $6,135.53. And this charge is based on the on demand put on our transport network infrastructure.
Does it look quite basic? It's basic workers' accommodation. Yeah, you've answered my question. Thank you.
Okay, look, I might just at this stage get Adam to just explain it to us in a different way, if you can, Adam. I think we're just struggling. What's the difference between one, 2 and 3? Yeah.
When and apologies, I've only arrived late, so I hope I'm not covering things that have already been covered. But so when we have a use come in and approved, we have to use the charges resolution as our policy, which we write our ICNs. Being a charges resolution, it's approved by council. It doesn't have, flexibility in terms of, choices, etc. if it's written in there. The problem we've got with rural workers accommodation is it's not a use written in the charge resolution, so we have to find a similar use. So, which there's multiple similar uses. So in terms of what the assessment Shakita's undertaken, the most similar use is long-term accommodation, which was the that was the amount that was put into the ICN, which is being contested here today. So as alternatives, you could call it, which is what the options are. Sorry, let's sort of read. So the second one was short-term accommodation, or what was that one, Shakira? I can't. Or charge the GFA basis for intensive animal industry instead. So that's, I guess that's the options that we've brought here today, saying, well, we recommend that it's long-term accommodation. However, there are other options because it's not a defined use within the charge resolution, so you've got choices to make. So essentially that's, I hope that's explained it better than, or explained it in a way that is understood. I don't know who, was that yours, Tim, before? Sorry, I
think it's all of ours, actually.
Okay, sorry.
Councillor Carol Taylor.
Madam Chair, short-term accommodation, I know this is out from Millmerran, but this could be, as Councillor Bill says, it's tied to the land. So I guess that, and I don't see them, I think they've done a good job with the accommodation. It's not basic at all. I think it's quite good. So I'm just concerned about, I don't know, I guess going forward, it's accommodation that's there. And I do believe that even though they won't be travelling backwards and forwards every day, there'll still be stress on the road network. And obviously our road charging regime is pretty ordinary. At the end of the day, I'm probably just as confused as everyone else about what's fair and reasonable here. I don't think the alternate one is, and I'm not sure that...
Can I ask you whether you've got a question there for the officer?
So I guess, can you clarify a little more what, because we've got three options, and the way it's been explained to me, I don't know which one would be the appropriate one, because we're just really put an option out there, and then they've asked for a consideration, and now we've thrown two more there, and I don't actually see any great structure around any of those. So I'm really wavering here. I don't know. I really don't know. And the other thing I'd like to ask also, and maybe it's for the next one, we've got no change of footprint for a doubling of cattle units. Who checks that? And does that tick the animal welfare box? So that's a doubling of intensity.
Let's stay within the accommodation one just for
no,
a minute.
This is the accommodation one, yeah.
Thank you. So probably the simplest way to think about it is the wording in the charges resolution is not specific to this issue. So when the charges have been applied, they've been applied in a way that's consistent with what has been done previously. However, there are options, which are these other two alternatives, to the way that you think about the charging should happen. It is not open to council officers to do that. As we said, there's no policy that would support us suddenly changing direction when we've dealt with this situation before and considered it a particular way. And so that's why you've got these other two options. For us, it's no right or wrong. It's a matter for debate between councillors as to whether they think, as to which one should apply. But from council officers' perspective, we have that gap in the wording. It's been dealt with in the past by a particular approach consistent with what's in this report. However, we are aware that council may wish to take a different approach. So we've suggested the wording there and the values, should that be council's decision based on the representations of the applicant.
Councillor Shine.
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify in my mind what the choices are, is it the case you have three choices in terms of the monetary imposition? One is $122,710.56. The second is $7,647.50, and the third is $61,355. Is that we have to make a choice of one of those three?
Correct.
Thank you. Councillor Bonhoff?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure if we have some people in the gallery here. We have suspended standing orders, and I don't know if they are Mr. Lee or Mr. O'Leary, the applicant or the consultant. But given that standing orders have been suspended, would it be appropriate to hear from, if they are here, either of those people?
Yeah.
I don't know if they've prepared for that or not. They
I
might
haven't
not
been given
want to take that up.
notification, but I think I might just be. Let's. Who have we got, Mr. Anthony? Come up here if you wouldn't mind. Yeah, maybe you can cast some light on what type of accommodation it is.
And our town planner, Greg Overton,
Okay,
as well.
come up. Thanks, Greg. Yeah.
Thank you. All right, yep.
Yeah. Thanks.
Madam Chair and councillors, thank you for having us here. So just to give you a very quick, I'm mindful of time, background on ACE, Australian Country Choice. It's a family business. It's my family's business, third generation. We're Queensland based, about 4.5 million acres of land throughout Queensland, 300,000 head of cattle capacity. We do have 3 current feedlots at the moment, one at Opal Creek, which is the one we're talking about today. It's our biggest and best and newest in the Toowoomba Regional Council. We do have Brisbane Valley Little Yard at in Brisbane Valley, 4,500. Then we've got Brindley Park at Roma in the Maranoa, and then we've got a processing facility in at Cannon Hill, and we kill about 6,000 head a week. We've put in DAs in for all our feedlots, so we've had it approved in the Maranoa to double from about 17 to 32,500. We've had it approved through the Western Downs Regional Council for a greenfield site at a place called Tungamah near Mooney to go from 0 to 60,000 head, and then we're putting this one in to go from 30 to 60,000 at Opal Creek. So, you know, we're looking at long-term growth and opportunities. We're intergenerational, and we're looking at this as our next big step up with our business. But we're going to look at this on, you know, where's it most financially viable. And I would say that it is becoming hardest to deal with the Toowoomba Regional Council for the charges and whatnot that you guys are imposing as opposed to the other councils. And we will have to make a decision based on what is most financially viable. We love Opal Creek. We'd love to see it doubled. But if we start at Tungamah, for example, and we start building there, then we'll continue to build there. So,
Mr. Lee, if you can maybe just explain to us what, in your view, the accommodation is, what it represents.
Yeah, sure. Well, we can't find accommodation for our people in towns. It's very hard to find accommodation. So what we do is set up accommodation on site for our people to be able to, you know, provide accommodation and food and be able to do the job they do. It's basic accommodation in the scheme of things, but we'd like to think that it's sufficient for what our people need, and they are mining spec dongers, but they are that sort of infrastructure, and they are for the people that operate there and they live there. They don't particularly move around a lot. They work and live there. Is that probably?
That's fine, Madam Chair. Could I just add to that? The nature of the accommodation is such that only 50% of the residents there actually have motor vehicles. The rest are sort of bussed in over time, in and out of the site. What we're dealing with today, Council is dealing with today, is a discretionary area, and because there's no neat fit in the land use designations under your infrastructure charges schedule. What it's been likened to is long-term accommodation, and in brackets that's rooming accommodation or relocatable home park or the like. It is far from that nature of use that is the nature of those other alternative land uses in terms of how this particular facility operates. There's no great load on the road network, and the discussion earlier on around about the impact on the external road infrastructure is being addressed through other conditions of the approval in terms of upgrading the Dunmore crossing, for example, which is going to be something of the order of between $400,000 and $600,000 that Australian Country Choice have to pay for, and there will be a broader community benefit associated with that. This is purely about the infrastructure charges for the accommodation. It is a very low impact on the external road network, and in my opinion, it is ancillary to the operation of the feedlot and the gross floor area calculations that apply, and it's not an unreasonable condition to be imposed.
Just ask you now, I'll get some questions from the other councillors. So would you classify it as short-term accommodation?
Look, I would say it's of that nature, Madam Chair, but again, it doesn't fit neatly into that category. That's why I would strongly advocate the ancillary nature.
Okay, thank you, Greg. Councillor McMahon?
My question was exactly the same. How long does the average worker stay? Is it short term, or are they setting up shop?
It depends on the person, but these are generally the junior workers, and they're not there. You do have turnover in that more junior staff. So they are used. They just might be in 2 or 3 people over that 1 year period.
So they're not sort of 7 days on, 7 days off, is what you're saying, Anthony?
Yes.
They'll be there for an extended period, but it's very basic accommodation in Dongas effectively, with a communal dining facility and recreation facilities that Australian Country Choice provides.
And it operates all year round, it's not seasonal?
That's right, yes. Yeah. But it's different to a self-contained unit or a cottage where there might be a family and coming and going in terms of longer term accommodation.
Okay. Any other questions, Councillor McDonald?
Thanks, Madam Chair. Just at Roma, set up there, do you have similar facilities there?
Yes.
And it's classed as ancillary use to the feedlot?
I believe so.
Yeah, look, my understanding it is ancillary to the Roma operation, the accommodation.
No other questions for the applicants? No? Thanks, guys. Oh, sorry, Councillor Carl.
Thanks, Chair. So, what's the normal term for a work visa?
Depends on the visa. So if it's a skilled visa, like a 482 visa, 3 to 4 years, but a lot of the 460, like the worker, what they call worker holiday visas, 6 months to a year.
So minimum 6 months, maximum 4 years.
Oh yeah, but that's for the visa holders, and then for our permanents, it depends on how long they're there for. So we can have some people that don't pass probationary period, that don't.
Generally speaking, you wouldn't be setting up accommodation for a particularly short-term use, given you wouldn't want high churn in your business of operating the feedlot with, and this is why the accommodation is there specifically for that purpose.
Yeah, we have a fairly standard manning, around 40 odd people, for example, at Opal, and then we need to staff it at that.
Yeah,
Yes.
thanks. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thanks, gentlemen. Thank you.
No worries.
All right. So, Councillor McDonald.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I'm happy to come out of standing orders, actually.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder for that? Councillor O'Shea. All those in favour? Okay. So I am up to the recommendation, which is that the recommendation that the infrastructure charge was calculated in, the council refused the request for a full waiver of the infrastructure charge levied in infrastructure charges notices issued on the 9th of November 2023 in relation to development approval MCUI 2020-553/A for a material change of use impact extension to intensive animal industry, feedlot 30,000 SCU to 60,000 FTU, and rural workers accommodation. Can I have someone move the recommendation? Councillor Carl. We have a seconder. Councillor Shine. All those in favour? 1, 2, 3 is lost. We have an alternative recommendation. Councillor McDonald.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I do have an alternate recommendation as option number 1. And I don't propose to read the whole thing out. I'm happy for you to if you'd like to.
Thank you.
You did such a great job with the last one.
We'll have a seconder, Councillor O'Shea. Put the motion. Anyone want to go into debate? It's the alternative, the number 1. Thanks, Kirsten. Councillor McDonald, do you want to speak to the motion?
Yeah, thanks. I will, Madam Chair, but only briefly. I think what we've heard today is that we're trying to keep pace with a couple of things that are happening at the moment across our region. The first of which is an acute shortage of accommodation that we have, and this is obviously as an industry that is removed from a township, which would mean there'd be less traffic on a daily basis to and from a location to a place where they wouldn't be able to find accommodation. So that's the first point. The second point is that there's no charging regime for this. And I think based on officers, and I thank the officers for their alternative options and for the conversation and questions that councillors have had, because before we'd heard all of the information from officers, I was really struggling to get my head around where we should land. But given in this instance the lack of impact on our infrastructure and the shortage of accommodation, the increase in activity from an economic perspective, I think on balance I'm quite happy with the recommendation or the option 1, that it is ancillary to the intensive animal industry, because it would be consistent with other farm activities that have ancillary use. So that's the reasons. Thanks.
Thanks, Mayor. Have a speaker against? Councillor Carl?
I don't think I'll have the numbers on this one, but anyway. I think the use as defined that was applied, the similar use was fair. I do not in any way, shape or form agree with this being short-term accommodation. It simply would not be there, given the fact that the development, the overall development, you can't shoebox this stuff. It would not exist without the principal activity. And given the quantum of increase of a principal activity, albeit neatly separated into 2 separate applications, which I find charming to say the least. But anyway, the collective impacts, and this is where I have some misgivings with our wonderful performance-based planning scheme regime in this state. Because we can't separate it from the principal activity and why this accommodation is being put here, there is increased activity. There's supplies in, there's more supplies in, there's more feed in for the stock, and there's more produce out. So let's not split hairs about whether workers are always going to be a minimal impact. It's a bit of a moot point in the context of why it's actually going there. And we've heard from the officers that we've waived the first 20 out of the 48 collective now, if this goes ahead. We'll talk about policy on the run. Let's look for the opportunity to fill the gap in the policy. Doesn't help this applicant, but we've heard from the officers that it's been treated consistently with other applications in the past. And dare I use the word precedent, this is a way of cheap accommodation in a I think that it allows other potential applicants and developments to come in under the radar with this form of accommodation if we're prepared to take this approach. So that's why I can't support it. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Carl. Can I have another speaker for the motion? I've got Councillor O'Shea. Councillor McMahon's keen to speak if you. Okay. Councillor McMahon.
You're quite welcome, Councillor O'Shea, but I'll take it. Look, I think we've learnt that you can't just pick and choose a policy to suit you, but I think where this differs is it is something that isn't clearly defined in the policy and something that we may need to clean up later. So we're left with the idea of where do we apply this? And I, at the start of the meeting, Googled what does ancillary mean? I mean, I know what it means, but what does it mean in this case? Providing necessary support for. And if you want to have a cattle feedlot out there, you've got to have staff to work on it. And I think this is an ancillary use that allows this system to function. It does not use our water, it does not use our sewage. We certainly don't have a local park out there. And as a result, I thought the original officer's recommendation was just fit as best we can, and I'm glad that we have the opportunity to run our eyes over it and get to the point where we think it should be, and I'm very happy with alternate option 1, so happy to speak for it.
I have a speaker against the motion. Councillor Shine?
Yeah, no, thanks, Chair. Just looking at the alternatives, and first of all, to adopt a compromise of a halfway mark, I'd be in favour of option 2 if it were proposed, and hence I'm opposing the current motion. It just seems to me that from a council's point of view, the cost of the officer's time and effort and work they've put into it is well above the 7,647 that's going to be collected. It's probably closer, sorry? So it's probably closer to that 61,000, I would have thought. And I think we've got to be realistic about what these things cost. And bearing in mind that, you know, ultimately it's going to be 60,000 head. This is small bickies compared with the ultimate return on that proposition.
We have another speaker for. Councillor McDonald, do you want to sum up?
Very quickly, I think the point I made earlier, I think I still stand with, despite some good points made by both Councillor Carl and Councillor Shine, and that is that you know, accommodation is an issue. For this place to continue to be vibrant, to add to the economy, to provide employment, it does need accommodation, and secondly, it's not impacting directly onto our network. We've got another application that will deal with some of the things that have been spoken about by the other councillors. So look, and I say this on balance, it is an ancillary use, and in regard to precedents, I'd suggest to you that every application that we look at requires similar oversight to what we've provided here. Maybe what sets this one apart is that it doesn't connect into our water, sewer, and the minimum impact. And that could be a way in which we could define a difference for another application that may be similar. So in that case, I'm happy to support the motion and obviously happy to vote on it.
I'll put the vote that the one that's up there on the screen, that it be reduced to 7,647.50. Now, are you happy, officers, with that? There was a bit of running a bit too on forward. Okay. Yep. Okay. So put the vote. All those in favour? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All those opposed? 3. Councillor Taylor did not vote. Sorry, I better count. Yes. Can I? Okay, so all those against, we'll just put up our hand so that Kirsten can get that. 4. Thanks, Kirsten. Okay. All right, now we are back to...
Madam Chair, are the reasons that Councillor McDonald articulated when he first spoke to the motion, do we need to include those, or is it sufficient?
No, I believe that we do need to include them. Have we got reasons, Kirsten?
I'm happy to put put the motions to what I've said, and this has been recorded, so if you could perhaps put in there as per when the motion was first put, and take it from that, the video would be fine.
Yes, it's okay with that. All right, so item number 7 is the suspension and, no, where am I? I need to suspend standing, no, I'm not suspending standing orders to go for this next one. Am I? Reinstatement of standing orders, item number 8, I don't have that, but. Now, item number 7 is suspension and reinstatement of standing orders for item number 8. That's what we're doing? Yeah. You'd think I'd have it by now, wouldn't you? My last go at it. Can I have someone suspend that? Move that we reinstate. Suspend standing orders. Councillor Taylor, Councillor O'Shea, all those in favour. Item number 8 is the material change of use impact, request to change approval extension to intensive animal industry feedlot, 3,000 SCU to 60,000 SCU, Dunmore Road at Dunmore. Jaden, you're not Jaden, are you? Sarah. I beg your pardon, Sarah. Thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, councillors. Oh, closer. My name's Sarah Owens. I'm a consultant planner, and today I'm here to talk about the consideration of a change application for the same lot that we were just talking about. It is only for a minor change, and the applicant has sought to change a number of conditions, specifically condition 52, which relates to roadworks, and conditions 81 to 88, which relate to the fuel forecourt of the approved intensive animal feedlot. So the original application and approval was given in May 2023, which effectively doubled the size of the intensive animal husbandry, the feedlot, and included rural works accommodation and the associated environmentally relevant activities. So specifically, the conditions that the applicant has requested, that condition 52 is amended further to relate only to works in stage 1, and that reflected the information that was provided as part of the negotiated decision notice by HIG. Changes to, they've requested conditions 81 to 88, which relate to the forecourt stormwater and surface runoff conditions, to be deleted. As part of the assessment, we have agreed to modify condition 52 and approve in part some changes to 81 to 88. Specifically, it's in the table on page 7 to 9. We go through the conditions. So effectively, condition 52, it's just a clarification of the roadworks. There's no actual change. Condition 81, we've maintained. Condition 82, we've maintained. And, well, we've amended it, just to remove some prescriptive elements. 83 is maintained. There's a slight change for formatting. 84 is maintained. 85 is amended to be deleted. 86 is maintained. And 87 and 88 were deleted, or recommended for deletion. Did you want me to go through specifically what they're about, or everyone's read that? So
Yes, thanks, Sarah. Yeah, thank you.
to go in detail? Okay.
The ones that particularly weren't maintained.
Pardon me?
Yeah.
Okay, the ones that were deleted. Okay, so mostly they were environmental considerations, and that was because they're kind of already encompassed within either another condition, predominantly condition 72. It says 82, that was my mistake. It's 72, and it relates effectively to stormwater. So maybe Marty can give a better overview of what that actually means, but they were deleted because they're effectively already covered, and the conditions that were imposed were quite specific.
So 85, 87 and 88 are recommended to be deleted, so they're all...
No, so only 85, 87 and 88 were recommended for deletion, yeah.
Mm-hmm. So they're all around the same issue, you say? Or they're covered in another? Yeah.
Broadly,
okay.
yeah, it's to do with the containment vessels and how what actually happens in that forecourt and where it all drains to, and that essentially is already met via a separate condition, which is condition 72, which relates to stormwater more generally. But Marty might have some specific. He'll be able to explain it better than I.
All right. Well, what I might do is go to questions. Thank you, Sarah, and then we can get specific questions answered. So, Councillor Taylor and then Councillor
Madam Chair, I did have a question because you said that it was 82 is essentially 72, and 72 says contaminants or contaminated water must not be directly or indirectly released from the subject land to and surface water or groundwater, and then 82. Fuel dispensing, can you show me where that is encompassed?
Apologies,
please?
yeah, it's...
Because you said they're encompassed in something else, and I actually can't see that.
Yep,
So, thank you.
in this table it actually says that the condition 82 meets this requirement. That's actually a mistake. It should have said condition 72 meets this requirement in the officer's comment.
Oh, okay, thank you very much.
And condition 72 is for stormwater
Back to
quality.
front, isn't it? Yeah,
Yes,
thank you.
my apologies.
Thank you.
So Von Hoff.
Thanks, Madam Chair. My question was the same as Councillor Taylor's, but I'd like to hear through you, maybe from Marty, to just understand a little bit more, because we're saying that basically any contaminants have to be, they can't be released from the subject land, including into the groundwater. So I just want to be clear on what the plan actually is then for those contaminants, including contaminated water potentially. Thank you.
Marty, if you wouldn't mind coming up, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, through the Chair. So, condition 72 is generic condition regarding contaminants from any part of the site entering stormwater. We have conditions regarding the fuel dispensing and bulk transfer areas, specifically in the conditions to be retained, where that's considered to be a higher risk activity of contaminants entering stormwater.
Okay, so whether it's fuel or any other contaminant, it's going to be, according to these conditions, it's going to be stored in a containment vessel that is compatible with the petroleum products and other likely chemicals, because the thinking is that that is the most stringent way of capturing contaminants. Is that a correct reading of the conditions?
Through the Chair, so the condition regarding a containment vessel is specific to the fuel dispensing and bulk transfer areas, so essentially the forecourt area of where that activity takes place. So that condition is limited to that activity in that area, so it's not the entirety of the site.
So, sorry, Marty, through you, Madam Chair, how is the contaminated water and other contaminants other than the fuel being, captured?
Sorry, Councillor, could you please repeat the question?
So fuel is being stored and captured in that contaminant vessel that's outlined in condition 82, but all other contaminants, including contaminated water, what's happening with it?
Councillor, through the Chair, so the extent of this application is specifically to conditions 80 to 88. So the parent application does have an extensive list of conditions regarding the site operations. That includes other sources of contamination.
Do you know, off the top of your head, can you maybe give us an outline of what addressing Councillor Von Hoff's
Because it's just that
concern?
85 also talks about contaminated water, so that's... I feel like I'm missing something here, Madam Chair, but I just need it to be articulated, please.
Councillor, through the Chair, contaminated water within condition 85 refers to areas outside the forecourt area. If they meet the requirements of the other conditions proposed to be retained or amended, there will be no contamination from this activity outside the forecourt area, which is why that condition is proposed to be deleted, because other sources of contamination are regulated by condition 72.
Any other questions for any of the officers? No? Thanks, Marnie. I think you're... Councillor Carl?
What was the, sorry, Marty, condition 82 amended, just so I'm clear in my mind, is page, oops. Gotcha, sorry, just catching up.
All right. If there's no further questions, turn the microphone off. Move that we reinstate standing orders. Thanks. Councillor McDonald, Councillor Shine, all those in favour? It's carried. All right. I am not going to read out this big recommendation this time. I can't seem to get my words out. But the motion is that council approve the change application regarding the development approval. Can I have someone move that recommendation? Councillor Shine, Councillor Summerfield has seconded it. All those in favour? It's carried. Those against? Councillor McMahon. And that is the conclusion of the meeting. Thanks, everyone.